It is the middle of August, and what some people don't know is that fall flowering for bees is very important, and in some ways even more important than spring flowers. So the two times that we have the most flowering is spring to early summer, and then there's usually a gap from about July to August. There's a lot less flowers, and then at the end of August, a lot of flowers that didn't bloom in the spring bloom in the fall. They've evolved to bloom in the fall. They have less competition. Since there's less flowers blooming, the pollinators have less choices, and they have a higher guarantee of being pollinated because there's less choices for those fall pollinators. In my opinion, I think fall, at least where I live, on my property, in the spring, I rely on flowers from trees, so tree blossoms. We have locusts on my property. We have maple. Those are good trees for bees. I also have sourwood on my property. I do have wildflowers that bloom in the spring as well. Black-eyed Susan, Queen Anne's lace. But in the fall, I feel like I have even more flowers, at least on my property. So I'm going to share with you some of the flowers I have that are great for bees to make that winter honey, to even maybe get a late August harvest. I've harvested in early October before, after harvesting in July, because I had so much fall nectar flow. So I'm going to show you some of these flowers. I live in the southeast in North Carolina, in the mountains, but a lot of these flowers grow in a lot of places in America. So let's go ahead and check them out. They're not just great for honeybees, they're great for bumblebees, for carpenter bees, for butterflies, of course. So I'm not just concerned about my own honeybees. If I can help out the pollinators in general, that's always a good thing. Right here even, oh, there they go. You can see these swallowtails on this flower, which is a beautiful flower, I think. This is Joepie Weed. It goes by quite a few other names, but Joepie Weed is especially loved by butterflies. We've gotten lots of butterflies on our Joepie Weed. Way up at the top of our pasture, we got a giant patch of it, probably 30 or 40 plants, I think. Down here, though, the butterflies love it. Sometimes I just stop my car on the driveway on the way up to the house, and I just check out the butterflies. So I even saw a bumblebee. It must have flown away. So even the native pollinators like bumblebees are really enjoying the Joepie weed. So a lot of the flowers I'm showing you all bloom in mid to late August, and some of them bloom all the way until October. This here, if you recognize this flower, anybody? This is jewelweed, and we have jewelweed everywhere this year. I mean, it's all over in the creek beds. Jewelweed especially likes a humid environment near creeks, and bumblebees really love the jewelweed flower. Hummingbirds also love the jewelweed flowers. I've been seeing a lot of hummingbirds this year. I haven't actually filled up my hummingbird feeders, but we've had so much jewelweed and other flowers that the hummingbirds have been around for sure. Now, your own honeybees also like jewelweed. I guess jewelweed honey is pretty valued. You can also use jewelweed to make soap and salves to help with poison ivy. So you have poison ivy, if you use jewel weed. Even in the wild, you can break open the stem and you can rub the stem on your poison ivy, and that will help you battle that itch. So let's go ahead and check out some more fall flowers. So right here you can see this is a very important fall flower for bees in a lot of places. This is goldenrod. Pretty easy to identify, goldenrod. I got a lot of goldenrod last year. I believe my fall honey was goldenrod and jewelweed, and I thought it was great. I thought it was better than my wildflower harvest from July. So goldenrod is just now starting. I think it's starting a little earlier. It's, again, mid-August. And I had goldenrod blooming in force in August, September, October last year. I mean, I had tons of it. So goldenrod is definitely a pretty important flower. Sorry, I'm looking at these bumblebees going crazy on a different flower. And I'll show you that one. I think it's Virginia Bower. There's a lot of names for it. So let's get a closer look at these bumblebees. Joepie Weed. So this is a native sunflower. Not exactly the best specimen, but I believe this is called Maximilian Sunflower. It's also called greenhead sunflower because it forms these crazy pods. I guess this is when it's pollinated. Maybe this is almost kind of like the fruit of it. I don't know. This is weird. But it's called greenhead sunflower because of that crazy green head. I don't see as many pollinators on this sunflower, but they definitely are there because that's how the flower gets pollinated, by attracting pollinators. So even if it's not necessarily attracting my honeybees, it's helping out my local habitat. So I am more than happy to have some of these sunflowers here. This is all, again, in our small little creek. It's so small it's not even a creek. It's a tiny little spring, and this whole patch here is that Maximilian sunflower right there. I tried to show this plant earlier. This is a much better specimen on our field fence here. This is called devil's hair. I guess also Virginia Bower, Dutchman's Bower sometimes. And it's pretty. I like it on the fence. And we can see that the bumblebees are really loving it. But not only that, Most likely one of my honeybees. I hope she's one of mine. So as you can see, the bumblebees are for sure loving my devil's hair. So I'm happy to keep it on the fence and hopefully get a little bit of honey. If not, my bees will have enough honey for the winter, I hope. So those are just some of the wildflowers that I have growing on my property. And the honeybees love them, the native bees love them, other pollinators, hummingbirds. The trick is to change your way of thinking when it comes to wildflowers. Silo, our dog, just chased one of our chickens. Don't do that, buddy. Be a good dog, Silo. Here they are. Hey, bud. You need to change your thinking of the term weed. Weeds are just flowers that you don't want there. And I definitely do have some weeds. If it's in my garden, it's probably a weed. But wildflowers can grow on the side of your property, on fences. Ooh, I just saw a wasp landing on that Virginia bower there. So there's probably a place on your property, even if you have a backyard, that you can let grow a little wild. If you have a bigger property, you know, you don't have to keep your fence lines 100% clean all the time. I try to maintain my property, but sometimes it gets a little out of hand, especially if the lawnmower's not working. But I know that even if I'm not keeping up with stuff, that there's going to be wildflowers blooming for the pollinators, for my bees, but for native pollinators as well. Clover, I always have white clover growing from probably June until September. So I know that my bees always have a nectar source. Even if it isn't their preferred nectar source, I like to know that it is there. They have that backup if they need it. It's kind of like if you always go to the same restaurant, you get tired of it, but you know where it's at. You can always go back to it. Same thing with clover. Some bees, that's their only option. But if you have a bunch of different options, you're probably going to not go to that one stable source because you're always eating that same type of food, right? The bees know what type of nectar they need, what other food they need, pollen, the propolis. So I trust my bees to find their nectar source. I do plant stuff when I can, but it's great that I have these wildflower sources. The key is don't mow your grass too often, because if you're always mowing your grass, you're not giving these late season plants a chance to actually grow and get to flowering. Luckily, I don't mow my grass as much as I should, and it shows. But now I have a great fall nectar source. I may even get a fall harvest if I'm lucky. So if you like this video, keep on watching. Tell me what blooms in your area for your bees, and who knows, maybe I'll plant some of it.